You were never taught to feel enough. You were taught to be enough. But being enough was always a moving target, wasn't it? Maybe it started young, when love felt conditional, when praise only came with performance. A smile, when you got an A silence. When you got a B.A. hug when you obeyed. A cold shoulder when you didn't. So you learned something unspoken. My value is tied to achievement. If I succeed, I'm worthy. If I fail, I disappear. This is how it begins. Not with trauma in the textbook sense, but with 1,000 invisible moments where your worth was put on trial. Over time, that external voice becomes internal. You don't need anyone else to criticize you anymore. You do. It yourself, automatically, relentlessly, even when you win. Because the voice that once belonged to a parent, a teacher, a culture, is now yours, and you trust it. Because it sounds like survival. Achievement is addictive. Every goal you hit is a quick dose of validation. A brief moment where you think, now I matter. But that moment fades, and the emptiness returns. So you do what's always worked. Chase the next goal. A new job. A new degree, a new body, a new project. On the outside, you look unstoppable, but inside, you're being driven by fear. Fear of stopping long enough to realize that even with all of this, you still don't feel whole. Fear of looking in the mirror and seeing someone who doesn't know who they are without applause. This is what we call conditional self-worth. It says, you only matter if you're useful. You only deserve love if you impress. You can only rest once you've proven your worth. This isn't healthy ambition. It's emotional survival. And the more you achieve, the higher the pedestal and the harder the fall. Because deep down, you're not climbing by choice. You're running from the shame of being seen as not enough. And no one told you the chase never ends. Here's the brutal truth. You're not chasing success. You're chasing relief. Relief from constant doubt. Relief from the inner voice that says you're a mistake in progress. Relief from the fear that if you stop, the world will finally see who you really are. But here's the secret. What you're trying to fill isn't a lack of achievement. It's a hunger for belonging. Somewhere in your story, you learned that being yourself wasn't enough. Maybe when your emotions were dismissed, or when you were rewarded for hiding your pain and being strong. So you adapted. You became an expert at pleasing, at anticipating other people's expectations, at becoming the version of yourself that would be most accepted. But every time you shapeshift to fit in, you drift further away from your true self. And it comes at a silent cost. A life where you're loved for a performance, but never for your essence. That is the hole, the void that no amount of success will ever fill. It happens slowly. First, you reach a new milestone and feel nothing. No pride, no relief, just a polite emptiness. Then you start sabotaging yourself. You lose focus, avoid tasks, quit before starting. Not because you're lazy, but because your body is tired of pretending everything is fine. This is the beginning of the silent collapse. Your mind says, come on, one more win. But your heart whispers, what's the point? When achievement stops numbing the pain, a crisis shows up that no one prepared you for. If I'm not my achievements, then who am I? That question is terrifying. Because you've spent your life building an identity on doing, on being the best, the strong one, the resilient one, the example. And now, for the first time, you're forced to feel what you've always avoided. The fear of failure, the pain of not being seen, the anger of having to prove your worth again and again. But here's the paradox. This collapse might just be the beginning of your freedom. What if you didn't have to prove yourself anymore? What if your worth wasn't in who you've become, but in who you always were? Before fear, before performance, before the mask. For the first time, you look inward without trying to fix anything. No self-improvement project, no action plan. You simply sit with yourself, and something strange happens. The pain doesn't swallow you. It softens, because for the first time you allow yourself to feel without judgment. And in that quiet space, you start to rediscover parts of yourself buried under years of pressure. Your curiosity, your sensitivity, your joy without reason, your authentic voice, all the things you suffocated in order to be accepted, all the things success could never replace. You realize you don't need to conquer the whole world to be worthy. You just need to come home, to yourself. Maybe the biggest lie the world ever taught you was that you had to become someone in order to deserve love. But what if what you really needed was to remember who you already were? The silence you fear holds the answers you seek, and the emptiness you run from may just be the space where your real self is waiting. You can keep running, keep collecting medals, promotions, likes, applause. Or you can stop, breathe, and finally realize that the person you've been working so hard to fix was never broken. They were just tired of fighting for a place that was already theirs from the beginning. You don't need to become anything more. You don't need to achieve anything else. You were already enough before any victory. And you still are, even now.